Welcome back to Becoming with Erika, a space where we heal out loud, grow through what tried to break us, and become everything we are meant to be. Today, I want to talk about two things that show up in every dream, every goal, every calling, and every season of growth. Yes, that's right. Uncertainty and scarcity. The funny thing is, most of us spend our lives trying to avoid them. We want certainty. We want security. We want guarantees. But what if uncertainty and scarcity aren't obstacles? What if they're actually part of the process? What if becoming requires both? And what if we could reframe the way we think about them? Because if you listen to my last episode about mindset, you know that changing the way we think about something can completely change the way we experience it. Let's start with scarcity. Scarcity is an economic term that simply means that there's not enough of something to meet everyone's wants or needs at the same time. A perfect example of this would be toilet paper in 2020. Remember that? People were going absolutely crazy to find toilet paper. It's not that the world completely ran out. The supply just couldn't keep up with the sudden demand. People were buying more than they needed. Store shelves were empty. The harder it became to find, the more valuable it seemed. Some people even bought extra just to resell it at a higher price because they knew people were desperate. Because fear took over. FOMO took over. The fear of not having enough caused people to grab everything they could. We became a bunch of little squirrels collecting nuts for the winter. And now here we are in 2026 with more toilet paper than we know what to do with. The scarcity passed. But here's what's interesting. The greatest scarcity most of us face isn't toilet paper. It's not even money. It's a scarcity of uncertainty, a scarcity of confidence, a scarcity of support, a scarcity of results, a scarcity of evidence that what we're doing is actually going to work out. When you start a business, launch a podcast, enter a relationship, begin a new career, or just start walking with God, you usually don't get guarantees. You get uncertainties. And uncertainties makes us uncomfortable because our brains crave safety. We want to know, will this work? Am I wasting my time? What if I fail? What if nobody's listening? What if I'm not enough? But every person has, sorry, but every person who has ever become something greater than they were before had to work through a season where they didn't know how their story would end. The uncertainty wasn't proof they were on the wrong path. It was proof they were moving forward despite not knowing. And that's where faith lives. Then comes scarcity. Not enough money, not enough followers, not enough experience, not enough opportunities, not enough time. At least that's what we feel like. But what if scarcity isn't there to stop us? What if it's there to teach us something? Creativity, gratitude, stewardship, resilience, trust. Let me share something personal. I launched this podcast before I knew what I was doing, before the audience, before the knowledge, before knowing where any of this could take me. The only thing I knew for certain was that if I didn't start, my dream would remain exactly that, a dream. Just a thought living inside my head, rent free. And if we're being completely honest, I still don't know what I'm doing. I just took a leap of faith. And so I hit record. I spoke into the microphone before there was any evidence that anyone cared. That's uncertainty. That's scarcity. And yet, that's exactly where becoming happens. Because becoming isn't built when everything isn't abundant. It's built when you keep going despite the lack. Most people leave their dreams sitting on a shelf because uncertainty gets in the driver's seat. Scarcity gets in the driver's seat. Fear gets in the driver's seat. And suddenly we're passengers in our own lives. But that's not where we belong. You belong in the driver's seat. You belong behind the wheel of your own becoming. Take that control back. Put that dream in motion. There are two things I've learned in church. Or I should say, there are two important things I've learned in church. The first is that not all good things come easily. Most things worth having requires sacrifice. They require faith. They require actions before certainty arrives. And the second comes from Proverbs 3:5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Think about that for a moment. God never said we had to understand everything. He never said we had to have the entire plan mapped out. He never said we had to know exactly how it was going to work out. He simply asked us to trust Him. And that brings me back to another episode where we talked about finding your why, because your why is more important than your know-how. You don't need to know how every step will unfold. You need to know why it's important enough for you to take the first step, and how often reveals itself along the journey. The how grows through your experience. The how develops through your obedience. The how is discovered through faith. So, what does overcoming uncertainty and scarcity actually look like? For me, it looked like starting messy, starting before I felt ready, starting before I had the equipment, starting before I had an audience, starting before I knew what I was doing. The funny thing is, I've had these episodes in my mind for years. Ideas, lessons, stories, thoughts. They were all just sitting there waiting. And one day my perspective shifted. Instead of asking, what if nobody listens? I started asking, who might need to hear this? Who could this help? Who could this encourage? Who could this inspire? Who could benefit from something I've learned through my own struggles? When my focus shifted from myself to serving others, something happened. My why became bigger than my fear. The importance of doing it became bigger than my uncertainty. The purpose became bigger than the scarcity. And that's why I'm here today. Not because I have all the answers, not because I know exactly where this podcast will lead, but because if these words can help even one person think differently, live differently, or see themselves differently, then it was all worth it. So let me leave you with this. What if uncertainty you're trying so hard to escape is actually the place where God wants to meet you? What if the scarcity you're fighting against is preparing you for the abundance you're praying for? What if the thing standing in front of you isn't a roadblock? What if the training grounds for the person you're becoming? What if that's where you're meant to be? Because becoming has never been about having everything. It's about trusting God with what you have and taking the next step anyways. And I want you to know that whatever it is, I know you can do it. because we are all created for a purpose. And if God placed it in your heart, don't let uncertainty convince you to abandon it. And know this, I am so proud of you, of who you're becoming. Until the next time, keep healing out loud, keep growing through what tried to break you, and keep becoming everything you were meant to be. Thank you, and God bless.